IPS Deep Think Tank. So today, 10/9/2024, marks the beginning of a new podcast series, the IPS Deep Think Tank, and this will be episode 1. And the purpose of this is to expand on the open phones concept, but do it in a group setting and invite more people to offer their ideas, maybe people who can't call in for reasons of timing or geography. So it's kind of an open forum. But this will be the first one. I'm going to publish it through all the regular channels, and hopefully that will bring more people in for subsequent. So these will be like focused think tanks, and then I think it'll also help us build up content on the way to AutoHoaxCon number 2. So hey, what's up, Àrmunn? Rìgh, are you going to be in AutoHoaxCon number 2?
I sure will, if you so wish it. For sure, yeah. And I think Reverse History also was excited about participating. If you want him, we talked about it.
He hit me up, and I'm like, look, I'm going to put out a invite for people who want to submit content, and everybody who's spoken at previous ones are always going to be invited to the next ones. So 100%, and I think we can make this one even more polished. And I think that it's going to continue to grow, but I think these meetings in between will help. So I want to, kind of talk about things we can do better or things we can organize within it. And one major difference, I'm going to live stream the next one. So we'll have hundreds of people listening, but the only people who can comment and engage in the Q&A will be in the Zoom conference. So it's still going to be the small, intimate, focused setting, but we'll have the option for people to listen in.
Yeah, sounds like a great idea, because and you're thinking live stream on YouTube, Odyssey altogether, Rumble, Twitch.
Yes, I'll blow it up there on everything and on the audio streams as well. And we're regularly getting 250 to 300 people on longer live streams. So I think that's the path.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because usually, in general, people's attention spans have reduced, so they can't pay attention to something much, that is longer than like 3 minutes, like you were saying the shorts now are. But it's interesting that in these circles, people do prefer the longer versions. They do prefer. That's something that I've noticed in recent years. So yeah. I think that it would. Sorry.
I agree with you. There's this split where I think it's people, maybe their attention spans aren't shorter, but they're by necessity having to be more selective, because they'll pay attention to a Netflix series and binge on it, but they won't pay attention to other things. And I think what we have here is something of value to people in this interest group. And I think that having a 5-hour conference and having most people listening start to finish says a lot about that.
Yeah, and I think these are excellent introduction to people who may be on the fence, let's say, and haven't made the jump to complete analysis of media fakery, or at least taking that into consideration. And I think these, especially from the example we got from the episode 1, how people reacted to it. It seems to be really a great vehicle to do that. And the way, if we can include more and diversified, topics and views from, other people collaborating and participating in it as speakers or whatever it is, the more it will grow, I think. Yeah, I think this was a great idea you had.
And it's going to overlap with other projects. So the tabloid concept is that the integration here is that the tabloid will echo a lot of what's being said in these live events. And so, for example, I could take a 20-minute section from a talk that you're giving, transcribe it into an article, and put a QR code so someone can download, I want to listen to third speaker from AutoHoaxCon number 2. And I'm going to build on this level, and I think that every single speaker can then be, basically a part of the paper, and it'll be a loop.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and you know what you could do as well to increase membership on whether it's YouTube or Odyssey also has a membership thing, by the way, or Patreon or whatever you like. is to cut out the individual segments. Like, for example, in the last one, you would cut out your segment, the reverse history segment, my segment, and put it as individual things for members only. If people just
Yes,
want to, you understand?
that's an excellent
Oh,
idea.
right.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. I need to get a video editing software that allows me to do that, but I can actually make that happen even on the first one, so that you can have like a playlist, and absolutely, that's really good.
I
'Cause
have one with a license. So if you need to, edit sequences in the sense of, cut this part out to make it a separate video, something like that, you just send me and I can do that. I can also
okay,
work audio if you like. Yeah.
yeah, sounds good. And I just got into a conversation with someone on Twitter, and she said, "Interesting information. What can I do with it?" And my response, and I didn't mean to be cold, but I was saying, it's 2024, and if you haven't figured out it this far about controlled alt media, good luck. And I just kind of, cut off the conversation at that. And it's because I think at this point, there are enough of us who don't need to be pushed over an edge, because I need people who've made that step on their own. This is something of an intellectual revolt, and it has to happen at the level of the individual. So we're not holding hands. It's not a big tent in that sense, but we're going to have a very pure group. And I think we have a pretty solid core where we can comfortably now say, these are the standards that we hold here. We're SciWar aware. That matters. We know what predictive programming is. And I'm open to debating. If someone wants to debate the origin of these things. But I do think that we have, at this point, the best explanation for how media at large works. And AutoHoax con number 2, my focus, I think, is going to be to maybe make it easier for some people and take a big claim and break it down in like 2 hours. Like, for example, why I think 9/11 was only a movie. And if I cite
Mhm.
all my best sources, and I'll say from a Metascript perspective, and I cite all the authors, I can just do a flash through of a lot of predictive programming, but mainly the foreshadowing and everything else that we kind of tie into it, but also how it was accomplished when it comes to special effects, gelatin B, all the hypotheticals that might explain these things, and then all the coincidences that suggest that the whole thing was orchestrated and scripted, including the drills. I think in 90 minutes or less, possibly, I can do a Metascript breakdown version of 9/11, an auto hoax version, sort of like loose change, but instead of conspiracy theory, demystifying the movie magic that became 9/11. But I might do that, just like focus on one particular thing, because my first one was a broad take on what auto hoaxing is, but now I want to kind of apply it and maybe get some people to take that leap, because 9/11 is one of the biggest ones. You get them to take that leap and recognize nobody died. The scale of the atrocity propaganda overwhelms them. If they can overcome that, everything else is just tiny.
Yeah, and I think that actually 311 became bigger, but it wasn't as, analyzed to the bone as 911 was. But 311 was bigger because it was interactive. It involved people actually doing something within the PSYOP. So, but anyway, regarding what you said about people asking for what do I do with it, that would be also an interesting segment in terms of explaining that these, long-term Psy wars, like you said in the last in the AutoX Con 1, um, create program responses that are triggered later, right? So people are programmed to expect, for example, if something is to change, there will have to be a revolution, because you've seen it all, in the news and in movies, that for a government to change, for example, you have to have a coup d'etat or something like that. So people have an expectation of what the solution will look like. Like, religious people will have an expectation that their savior is going to come, or that God will do the judgment day or whatever. So the idea there would be to remove, deprogram from all those expected answers, so that you can have access to what the solution might actually be. because by being deprogrammed is already part of that solution. So there could be a segment based on that, on presenting for people who ask, okay, yeah, that's all fine, but what do we do with it now? Well, now you deprogram, and the rest will come, right?
Yeah, that's a common question, and people they can't grasp it. Like, why? And I think I could make the case that the reason it matters is this: the head in the sand approach of not looking at it reduces your situational awareness, and then when they roll out a big psyop, you're lost. You don't know how to discern real from fake, so you're kind of dependent on brainwashed people to tell you what's up. But I think we can make the case that the false worldview has constraints on you physically, emotionally, mentally, and possibly spiritually if you believe that. And these constraints would be things like, for example, like you mentioned, the triggers, the fact that you're triggerable by headlines that are meant to shock you. Yeah, that's a form of long term. It's psychological and emotional abuse, but it's also darkening your worldview, possibly creating phobias about situations or people that maybe aren't even relevant. It makes people afraid of different things. Like from an ideological perspective, they inflate the hate, perception of being victims. I remember I was in a hotel and I was watching CNN and it was called Night of Hate. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Because on the news, there was, a lot of stuff about right-wing hatred and stuff. And they played a documentary that was a couple years old. They played it on a night that coincided with headlines. And if you didn't leave, you might get the impression that there were people outside, looking for targets. So they create this theater of the mind, like War of the Worlds, where it is like War of the Worlds. And they never tell you it's fake. So there's the emotional, psychological part. And then there's the mental part of it where if they're using the tactics of marketing, logical fallacies, and various forms of coercion, to me, that's what I mean by intellectual revolt. They're telling you, we don't care what you think. We want you to believe. And I'm at the point where I'm not a believer anymore. I'm a non-believer, and I'm staying that way. If there's something that I need to know, bring the facts. That should be the media's job. Only we have found out that the media's job is not to inform, but to conform minds. And so, yeah, this is a multifaceted approach to unplugging, but there are so many reasons to do so.
And for sure, when you were, asking if it might even affect the spiritual level, yes, I think it does, and I'll give you an example. NDEs, for example, right? And I'm not putting into question that people do see things in those experiences, but have you noticed how these NDEs always include programmed content? For example, if you're a Christian, you see Jesus, or you tend to see Jesus, right? If you're into ufology, you tend to see aliens. If you're, it always plays on something that was pre-programmed there. So I think that even when we go to the spiritual level, these expectations that you carry with you do play a part in the projection in front of you. I am convinced of that.
I've observed something similar with drugs where people will say, I took some DMT or I took some acid and then I flew out into space and I saw the Earth. And it's like, did you see the Earth or did you see a concept that was planted there? Because if you didn't see an oblate spheroid, then you probably have imagined this. And so they were given a paradigm and their imagination just follows it. But you're right about near-death experiences. Like Ashley Babbitt, when she got shot in the neck and she's falling back, she probably saw like Donald Trump with a crown of thorns made of gold, like floating over her. It's funny. But no, these are evidences to me of people mostly making stuff up.
Yes, and even the other day, and this was, I remember that because the other day there was a post somewhere on a channel in Discord about an NDE, and I started listening. Just let's check this out. And I stopped at 1 minute when the person that was telling the story said that, oh, and then I went through space and I saw the planets and I saw the blue marble of Earth. And I was like, okay, so either this is complete bullshit, which it's also a possibility, or assuming that you did have an NDE, you were projecting pre-programmed content onto the vision, let's say, right? So This is, I think, a very important point at the spiritual level, because I think it does affect the let's say the content there, if we could call it content. It does
Yeah, I,
affect the observation.
I think there's another thing to consider too is that if you're given a false worldview or you live in a world that has been tainted with lies and things that don't exist, it doesn't comport with your reality. And so there's this cognitive dissonance because what I'm told is real isn't what I'm experiencing, and you just kind of overlook it. And I think that's the fog of Psywar. That's the intentional confusion where what you see isn't what you're told it is, or in other words, there are superstitions and hyperstitions enhancing your reality. And I think that disconnect from reality, the cognitive dissonance, might be something that prevents somebody from noticing perhaps meaningful coincidences or anything, perhaps even concepts of spiritual experiences, mystic experiences. A lot of these things in our modern paradigm are ruled out as symptoms of mental illness, apophenia, and something to be medicated. And the dominant paradigm has it that, we're basically apes with big egos on a dead universe. And everything in media reinforces that. And if it's a false model, and maybe it's constraining us not only mentally and then having all of its emotional ties, but it could be something of a spiritual, um, I guess, almost like a barrier to making deeper connections. And then you'll notice how the people who make connections are pretty much ridiculed as conspiracy theorists, like the meme of the guy connecting all the things, and they laugh at this, and it's like, well, they can laugh, but the fact of it is, what we have uncovered here is that there is an intentional
Yeah.
alignment ubiquitously, and this has always been the case, between entertainment, and they've aligned it with mythology and religions, and future fake news, which is literally history. So we're seeing history in the making. We figured out the mechanism, and that's why I think this is the time for AutoHoaxCon and these meetings to start moving forward as a think tank on this premise. Because I don't care if I run into people who are clueless about what we're saying. They can figure it out in our wake if they listen and they follow along. But I'm not pandering to that. I'm specifically reaching out to the people who've already figured out to a large extent how worldview warfare is waged.
Yes, and I think there's a lot more listening that don't participate than you think. Also, when you mentioned confusion, one thing also needs to be taken into consideration, which is the believer in a context. So someone who is at the center of a point of view of perception within a given context that can be a false context, of course, will tend to fill in the blanks when confusion sets in. And this is similar to, for example, if you're sleeping, you're dreaming, you're having a dream, right? So you're the point of view, the center of that perception, and it's a world that lives, let's say, in your imagination, in your psyche. And imagine that the phone rings, right? And just before you wake up, you may, even in your dream, include that sound of the phone ringing into the dream, right? So a phone may ring in the dream when it's in real life that is ringing, right? So your psyche fills in, includes something that is dissonant with the dream world onto the dream world so that it can continue to manifest that point of view. Because again, like I stated several times, the mental character, although it's not biological, has a survival instinct mechanism and wants to prolong as much as it can its context, its relevancy within the mind.
I notice another barrier is that many people are married to things or they're attached to things that were emotionally triggering when they happen. And maybe this is just part of how belief systems work, but like people were triggered into believing the worst stuff on 9/11, and now whenever you say 9/11, they get triggered. Like now they're ducking and covering. It's like they have PTSD, and I think I see it in a lot of truthers. The ones who are still enraged and mad about it, well, these are emotions that were planted there. And I think that part of the process of deprogramming is deconstructing these events and removing the emotional charge from it, it kind of reminds me of Scientology auditing, where you revisit events where you have picked up damaging mind viruses they call engrams, and by going over it supposedly, and then by talking through it, you lessen its charge. And they have this thing called an e-meter to register it. Now, whether or not that's pseudo or psychobabble and nonsense culty stuff is almost immaterial, because I think in practice there is something to therapy when it comes to revisiting past events.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think these media events are events for people who are true believers. And they do need to be, I think, broken down in order for them to lose that triggering. Because you can't trigger me with 9/11. You can't really get me to look. Like my pulse
No,
doesn't
no.
go up on any stuff. You see jumpers on TV or pictures of jumpers, and some people still cry. They throw out their heart emojis, and at no point do I even get there. I'm just like, this is not even registering any sort of trauma for me at all.
Yes, and
Yeah, but
oh, sorry.
I want to say, like, I'm with you on like the being completely deprogrammed from the 9/11 stuff. Um, but I was 16 at the time when it happened, and I saw what they were, whatever they were showing on TV. I'm completely deprogrammed. I don't care like what happened. I think no one died. I think it's all fake. But I am traumatized by it, and I don't know how to describe how I'm traumatized by it. But I know that it's traumatized me, and it happened probably when I was younger. Like I didn't feel it at the time, but it's definitely traumatized me, and I don't know what it's doing to me now subconsciously. Same with coronavirus, all that. I'm traumatized by it for sure. But the whole time I knew it was a hoax. I was with IPS. I joined listening to you back in 2000, just before it started, actually. So I know that it's traumatized me because I can feel it. I can feel the energy of it, that I'm traumatized, but I'm deprogrammed. So even though I am not, I know what about what it is. I am traumatized by it, and I just wonder what it is doing to me. So even though you
I
guys,
think, plain, sorry.
I just want to say, like, even though you guys say that, like, think deep within yourself because you probably are traumatized by it in some form. You just don't know what it's doing to you.
Yeah, we have several traumas at a collective and individual level, sure, but these collective induced traumas that are have no connection to actual events, actual reality. The only thing that you need to unplug from it once you realize they're false is the emotional charge. And to do that is, I mean, if you consider this metaphor, right? Imagine that the trauma of, for example, 9/11, like you said, is this big monster that stands in front of you and it's very scary, right? So there's this emotional charge of whether it's fear or disgust or whatever. And once you look at the monster and you see, wait, this is a prop. This is not a monster. This is a model used in movies, right? Like they used to do for those 80s movies and so on. Then it loses its emotional charge. You can even touch, in an imaginary sense, touch the doll and see it's made of plastic. So there's nothing organic about that monster. It was just something that you perceived as scary or as traumatic. And that, by removing that emotional charge, by disconnecting that emotional charge, that is brought about by the rational analysis, then I think that that kind of trauma is much easier to dissipate than a trauma of something that actually happened in your life, at an individual level. That would be
Okay.
my opinion.
Yeah, I agree actually. So, but then now, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, so where it redirects it now that you're saying that, the redirection is the trauma of knowing that, uh, like, somewhere outside of us is something that is planning these fake things, like that is doing this to us. And like, if you aren't careful, you're gonna think that this thing is holding us back, and that's a part of trauma too, like self-limiting beliefs. So a lot of like media and stuff, it puts into you self-limiting beliefs. I know I have them myself, and I try to be aware of them. But in like success principles, stuff like that, like getting rid of your self-limiting beliefs is what can help you be more successful. Like that's what a lot of successful entrepreneurs talk about and stuff. Like like repeating to yourself, like, I am capable, I am. But when we get this media and it says like, you can't be successful because if you try to step up, they're going to knock your tower down. Like, or behind the scenes that there's these people, these meta scripters that are controlling the strings. You can't like rise above them. Like these are self-limiting beliefs that now I can tell that my trauma is now I have a self-limiting belief that there's meta scripters that they are there. We can see them, but we can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, so that's holding us back as deprogram people as well. So it's just like there's once you get to the next one step, there's another step. There's always another step, and that's just my opinion. But like, I just want to say that.
This has
Plain,
never
they can
happened though.
always.
There have never
Sorry.
been deprogrammed before. That's what I'm like. This is new. If you think about it, alt media has always been fed futility. You're conquered. The satanic cabal rules over you, and they're going to kill you, and they're going to depopulate the world and turn it into a hellscape. This is old news, and what we're bringing here is a different perspective that has never existed in this modern era. I would consider this to be something of a neo-enlightenment, and the whole system's going to have to change as a result if it spirals out of control. And there's no reason why it shouldn't. I don't see them stopping us. But I'm very optimistic about the future because the deprogrammed can outnumber the programmers in a short amount of time. And we're not compartmentalized. We have full spectrum awareness, and they're selectively decompartmentalized. So this is basically a battle between intelligentsia. And if we outnumber the newsbenders, and we have it, and we're doing it in such a way that it's a true counterculture, I don't see them stopping it. I don't know where it goes, but I have nothing but optimism about the future of this.
And within their system, and when I say their system, is because it's a virtual reality that they created. And if you look at it, what is a government? What is a country? But a piece of paper, and agreed upon consensus, right? So from here to here is the U.S. From here to here is Canada. From here to here is Mexico, etc., right? And within these delineations, we have a set of rules. Outside of those delineations, it's another set of rules, right? So when within their system, they can always topple towers, like you said, because it's within the. And we have the example now of Tim that has been trying to get a job within the system, and he's being held back. So that for sure can happen, but that is something different. That's a different level. What is being talked about here is something that is or is supposed to be organic, in the sense of we want to know reality as it is, not as is purported to be, not through another idol to worship, but as it is. Whether it's a bright reality, a dark reality, or both, because I think it's both. I think that the observable, organic reality has both. And one thing that they, for sure, on all avenues try to prevent is asking questions. Because even if you think of all the programming, and I can even tell a story of mine, which it's not really a story, but an experience. If you think over the years, for example, the word inquisition. Inquisition means to ask questions, someone who asks questions, right? You inquire. That's the source of the word. But when you think of inquisition, what do you think? You think torture. You think, maniacs, psychopaths, right? Witch hunting, that kind of thing. And that is a program. That is not actual reality. Of course, you can say, "Oh, but it's on historical records." We can doubt historical records. We have enough evidence to doubt historical records, right? So it's not here, in the real organic sense. It's a concept. So inquisition, the act of inquiring, is the most important avenue that we can, that one can take, and of course, asking questions and trying to obtain the answers, at least trying to obtain and identify the wrong answers, so that you can, by inference, reach the what may be the right answer.
Yeah, the problem with truthers has been they're always asking questions, and like, I'm just asking questions. What is in the clouds? What is in the water? I'm just asking questions, and I don't see them as good faith questions if they're not trying to answer it. And if they're still asking the same questions 10 years later, then I'm like, okay, you're proposing something in the form of a question. It's a loaded question. You have a hidden smuggled premise,
Yes.
and you're trying to lead me
Yes.
somewhere. So I realize now, if someone is just asking questions, I'm like, well, come back to me when you have answers, because that's where we are. Like, I'm not confused, and I'm happy to separate from the confused. The people who are still on the fence, like, well, I don't know, maybe some people died, and maybe the Puff Daddy thing's real. Okay, well, what's your
Yes.
standard of evidence?
Like you well stated, Tim, and sorry to interrupt there, but just to make a point about what you stated, they are not actually asking questions. What they are doing is directing the person they're talking to answer the question the way they want. Because if the person says, then if it's with what I have, then it has to be this, and this is an answer that was directed by the person asking the questions. The one question after another leads the person towards a certain answer, and if they say the answer, it has far more power than if they heard the answer. You understand?
Yes,
So
that's
it's a
called,
manipulation technique. Yeah.
it's well known, it's called interrogator interference. And I believe that this is one of the main drivers of the Mandela effect. It's the way the question is framed, the either or
Mhm.
option, but absent the bias and agenda, people would not arrive at these conclusions. And so it's one of the main steering mechanisms that drives people into Trutherville is they have questions because they're thinking, and you have all these people who are like, yeah, I'm just asking questions too. And you don't know that these people are plants, agents, or conditioned by plants and agents to behave like plants and agents, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, we have reversed history in the house. Hey, Christopher, do you want to participate?
Maybe he's away from keyboard at the moment, but anybody here, just so you know,
Oh,
this is episode one of the IPS Deep Think Tank. This is for October 9th, 2024. I'm going to do these at least twice a week, and it's going to be published with all the regular podcast feeds. But the objective here is to um, get kind of an expanded view from what we get just on the nightly phones, and then hopefully build a lot of content or threads that we can maybe answer with the next convention. So AutoHoax Con number 2 is going to happen in a few weeks. So I'm kind of just putting it out there. If anyone has any ideas or things that we should focus on, I can certainly.
another idea for Auto HoaxCon 2. I think you should invite Cubstar for a segment about astro mythology, which is, I think, a blueprint that is followed in all these stories that are presented in the virtual reality. And so if we are able to see the blueprint, we're able to see the patterns in the actual applied virtual stories that are given.
Noted. I'll take note and I'll reach out because astrotheology is one of the things that I think needs to be understood to really get the meaning of the meta scripts because they're writing history. There is this consensus, there is this framework, and I do believe you can demonstrate that it originates in the stars and it's templated off the precession of the equinoxes, the idea of aeons. I was told this directly by an OTO offshoot, an abbey of Thelema, about this coming change. And I think you can perfectly correlate the Great Reset, the Great Awakening, 2020, to the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn on the winter solstice, which hadn't happened in 2,000 years. So the idea is that it's like a new Christmas star, new age, year zero, Great Reset, and it all tied in with that conjunction. And I think that's an indicator of how everything's astrotheologically timed. And we can also find the same to be true with many psyops.
Yeah. Yeah, not just the timings, but the actual stories in mythology told about the constellations and the relationship between them and so on. That is often used as blueprints for these, news events or historical events, etc., etc. And for example, recently I was pointed out by someone how the Andromeda contains two stars that are actually named after Kamala Harris, for example. One was Amalek and the other one was Syrah. And if you invert, it shows Kamala Harris. So clearly, the Kamala Harris character in the world stage is playing the part of Andromeda. And when we see Andromeda, it's a chained woman, right? So she is perhaps chained by the, I don't know, if you look at it from a leftist perspective, chained by the patriarchy, because she needed to, for a man to step down, for her to finally be able to exert her own power, these narratives. So this is something, an example that is visible of how it relates, and this is a like one-to-one correlation because the name is obvious, of a character in the world stage being correlated to a constellation that has a mythology behind it. So the value of the mythology is also applied onto the story of the character.
Right. Like I was thinking that when we say mythology, it was biblical. It's also from Greek mythology. It's sometimes contemporary comic book stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, one of the big myths is the Space Odyssey, which correlates with, of course, Homer's The Odyssey, Odysseus, stranded on an island held captive by a nymph named Calypso. So the astronauts now on their Space Odyssey, Calypso gets them stranded. And so I'm wondering, is this going to follow some mythic template? What comes after Calypso? Well, the Cyclops and Poseidon, troubles at sea. So I'm not sure what happens next with them, but there's clearly a lot of syncretism and a lot of, it's very eclectic. When you look at the history as they write it, they borrow from many different sources. And recently I watched Megalopolis, which has this combination of ancient Rome and modern New York. So it's anachronistic. And I think that's a part of how this thing operates, where they don't have any allegiance to one particular source, but rather it's almost like a game in a way when they write this stuff. How much they encode, how much, double entendres, world stage names that seem to reflect the person's purpose. Like Sam Bankman-Fried, sounds like fraud. So many examples of names that seem to correspond to their world stage role. It's almost like at points comedy, other points tragedy, sometimes horror. But I do call it the theater of Psywar because I think they have used for a long time theater as a way of waging worldview warfare on everybody. And we're talking about mystery schools, and ultimately it's about the veil between the initiated interpretation and the non-initiated interpretation. And I think what we're looking at here is a society that's veiled with false explanations, and it's been put in a Truman Show construct that's purely mental. And so our job, or what we're doing here, is we're examining these various veils and pulling back on them. And this is the mystery school concept, though. The esoteric separated by a veil from the exoteric. And we're looking past the screen, which is the new veil, the new hoodwink. And we're taking these insights and building off of it instead of just minimizing it. And I think truthers have consistently been held in thrall by well-funded, highly placed, loudmouth conspiracy theorists, which prevent them from taking seriously a lot of the things that would even debunk these big-time conspiracy theorists as anything other than being part of the establishment. So
yes,
what we're doing
because they have expectations, and expectations generate the result in the perception. For example, examining a photograph or a piece of video, right? For decades, we have been exposed to photography, even at a personal level. We have been exposed to video. We've made, personal videos, personal photographs, whatever. And the photographs and the videos, we have been programmed, let's say self-programmed, to know that, the picture I took was actually, close to what I was seeing. So this picture is real, right? So we have, for example, a correlation between photograph reality. Photograph equals reality. Video equals reality. When it's not the case, because of course photographs can be tampered with, fabricated altogether, the same with videos. And so when we watch a photograph or a video, we tend to immediately assume, like it's the first, response within ourselves is, oh, it must have happened because I'm seeing an image, because I'm seeing a video, right? And so it's in the same way the truthers are built on, the truther mentality is built on the expectation that humanity is in a continuous natural state of power seeking and conflict. This is the pre-programmed belief that they base themselves upon. So whenever they come across something, their first explanation is, oh, there's an enemy that has taken over and that is, obtaining more power and fighting against us. And then, the population, et cetera, all these sub agendas and sub sets of the same paradigm, right?
It calls
this
them
is
to
because,
activism. It calls them to evangelism and activism.
yes,
To be a truther is
yes,
to be, I gotta wake people up. I gotta be the person that ruins
right.
Thanksgiving.
Because
And
because they're in a war. In their perception, they are in a war. You understand? And that is the expectation, right? And it stems from a pre-programmed expectation that the world, the reality, is a constant state of conflict and a constant state of power struggle, let's say, right? If they understand that that was pre-programmed, then there might be the chance that they can see that programming for what it is and look elsewhere. But I think that expectation plays a very, very important role in all these things.
yeah, I don't have any confidence or any sort of inkling or indication anywhere at all. There's going to be a spontaneous uprising of skeptics who reject media wholesale. It's not going to happen. It's only
No.
happening here for a reason. There's no reason to even think about it. When people are incredulous about what I'm saying, it's like you can't say everything's fake. Like, you don't get it. You've already accepted the premise that everything's real, and then you're adding on to it. But at this point, I'm not even interested in evangelizing or waking people up. I want there to be a strong distinction between our kind and theirs. We have to create that distinction. There has to be a schism, there has to be a divergence, and it has to be alienating to people who don't get it, who don't have any sort of situational awareness for a lot of reasons. But quality control and to accelerate auto-hoaxing as a philosophy, as a methodology, as an intellectual revolt, we cannot dilute our messaging, like pandering and catering to the intellectually lazy, qualified, and incurious. And
Oh,
there's and even beyond just like the obvious, because a lot of people just state the obvious and say that's fake. I don't believe it. It's like, well, that's low info non-belief. So we're fine-tuning, getting away from low info non-believers. If you can't tell me why you don't believe that, then I don't believe that you don't believe it. I need to know that you don't believe it. I need to know why. We have higher standards, and so some people believe that Diddy did all these bad things. Okay, well, you're trusting the same psyop entertainment complex that brings you every other psyop. They can fake take down buildings in front of the world. You think they can't fake salacious sex scandals? And then I see Diddy on Monsters Ball, and now I'm even less inclined to believe it's real. I'm very well aware that Metascript writers have twisted imaginations, and they could come up with this stuff. And so I'm kind of thinking that everybody who falls into the psyops, whether it's violence, terror attacks, or celebrity stuff, I think they're all being duped. And there's different ways to pull at your heartstrings or get your interest and attention. They can get you through violence, sex, all these different basic storylines that they use to get people to give their
yes.
attention.
Yes, I wasn't suggesting at all that it would be a collective thing. It can only happen at the individual level. I've stated that many times. What I was trying to convey is a key factor in the programming of that perception, of being held to a perception that there's this enemy at all times trying to get you. And this stems from a long-term programming of making sure that people perceive organic reality to be a constant state of conflict, especially in the human world.
Oh yeah. You know what
You
really gets them?
know?
Xenophobia. I mean, have you noticed how it was
Yeah.
like a mind virus where one day someone on the phone said, "Aren't you worried about the military-age men coming across the border?" And I said, "No. I heard this 8 years ago. Only people on the fringe right call them military age. People on the left call them working age. So it's like choose your own apocalypse, choose your own belief, you know." And so I realized at that point that this meme was going viral among truthers, where every other truther was now suddenly afraid of now it's Haitians eating cats. And yeah, so there's no vetting. They fear first, ask questions never. And it's pathetic at this point.
I just wanted to touch on one thing. So two things actually. One is, Tim, I want your channel to grow though. Like I want you to be able to support yourself and like keep getting your show better and better because like you're cutting edge. So you need to get to a point where you can make money. I don't want you to work at some job. I want you to get to a point where you can do your gig here and invest back into it. So like you have like a nice setup, you can do your artwork and all that stuff. Like you deserve way more than you have for subs. And we don't want to wake people up, but if you can somehow like open yourself up to a broader audience of those people that we are criticizing, they are truthers, but like I was once like them. So I then had to go on a journey to get to the point where like, oh wait, I'm actually worse than a normie because I've taken the bait of all these logical fallacies. A big thing is logical fallacies. If people can learn that, they can deprogram. But those people are the ones that are like they could come over to this side and then yeah, we don't want to, you're not wanting to wake people up, but you do want to, you're doing a form of art and deconstruction and like it's a great thing. So I think that you need to figure out a way to grow your channel in some manner that like can reach out to more people, even though I know that's not your real goal. What do you think your real goal is with your channel? Because I want to see you succeed and do well.
Well, I don't plan for this, but I am sitting on a likely judgment in my favor on a civil and limited case. I asked for 5 million. Like we may have the funding issues squared away, no problem. So the last thing I want to do is make a deal with the devil because we have to survive. And let's open the tent a little bit and let these mind war casualties in because then we'll be drowned out. Then I'm debating again with people who are still hung up on 5G towers, chemtrails, and anti-vax. We had to flush those people out. We had to flush out the xenophobes, the identity politics, racist types. It's not worth it enlarging it if we diminish quality. So the plan for growth is monthly auto hoax conventions where those will bring in larger numbers of people who are pre-vetted by their own ability to discern value in what we're promoting. So I think, like for example, we take the reverse history presentation, the basic outline of autohoaxology, and what every speaker puts out there. We promulgate that, and it brings more people in. And then we're going to live stream the next AutoHoaxCon and do the Zoom conference for people who are insiders. So I think that we just have to plan on reaching out more instead of waiting for people to come to us. And I think we can grow that way without sacrificing quality. Because I agree with you, it would be better if I don't have to divert my time and attention from this. And and obviously we're in such a small niche category that financing it's difficult, and we don't get promoted by the other side because they know, or at least our handlers know that we're enemies, and they know who we are obviously, and we're kind of like the unacknowledged. But whether I win the lawsuit short term or long term, I think we can still win at this if we can just get these cons to go forward a little bit and get the tabloid moving. Because the tabloid's a moneymaker, it really is. But it just needs a bit more starting capital.
Yeah, and understand that truthers, of course, the normies will not, for obvious reasons, but truthers will not promote media fakery analysis because their perceived and identified mental characters want their worldview to remain so that the mental characters can survive. It's a personality that has taken over the mind due to a weakened ego. I go into this in my work, but and it needs the continuation of a constant conflict that will never be won, and it's never supposed to be won, for the mental character to be able to live on, and to live on in a seat of power in the mind, right? Because if they were to admit, okay, I am going to look at this, and we've all been through that, right? Which of us never looked at an event that we thought was real? We looked at it from a different angle. We took the step of courage. We looked at it. We saw, okay, this is clearly fakery that went on here, right? And that destroyed the mental personality. It took it away. It took its power away. And it strengthened the ego, the decision maker, the filter, right? And so the truthers are not able, because that would be a matter of death to them. And they are fighting a life and death situation inside their own minds, right? If you take away the war, you take away their personalities, you take away their sense of worth, right? So I just wanted to say that.
Great points there. Great points. They have built up sort of these ego attachments to being a part of something greater than themselves, and they associate with it. Like some people get mad when you tell them the moon landing's fake. And they're like, no, we went to the moon. I take great pride in that. Like, no, you were probably asleep at the time. Or we won the Super Bowl, and they're ready to fight. They're just amped up because they won, or they're just they get attached to this super organism. And I've heard you talk about this before. These hive minds, these super organisms, where the individual ego does sacrifice itself to the collective, and so it dies to become a part of it. But then when you attack it, they defend it like a hive mind, and they do have to die to that false self in order to, it's a matter of accepting some level of humility. Say, I've been duped. I was tricked by this. I was tricked by that. I was fooled here, but now I'm on this side of the screen and I'm processing information in such a way I'm not automatically catching bad belief systems like mind flu. And mind war inoculation's real. And until you're on this side of the screen, you're still susceptible. And there are people who are like 9/10 of the way over here who automatically believe everything about Diddy, for example. Now, that may be true, but we don't have enough information to say so conclusively. And when you examine predictive programming and other factors, it becomes increasingly likely the story could be engineered. So it's premature to say it's true. But I'm just, pointing out that there are definitely indicators that some people aren't all the way free of the hive mind and the simulation and its influence. But we're pretty much getting there with most people. It's easier to get people there with fake shootings, where the agenda is more obvious. When it comes to something like Diddy or Epstein and stuff, it becomes a little more believable, but that feeds into their appeal to motive fallacy, their demonization of the other side, where it's just easy to believe that Hillary Clinton eats babies. So you have Roseanne Barr on a stage next to Tucker Carlson screaming that Hillary Clinton's a vampire that eats babies, and everybody cheers and laughs. But if she were to say nobody died on 9/11, they wouldn't accept that. So isn't it funny how the claim of Clinton eating babies is easier for people to accept, more palatable, than the idea that the news media would collude to fake the masses?
Yeah, because the weight of the predictive programming, which I would perhaps, it would be better named as pre-programming more than predictive. It's actually programming at that time for something that is in the future, regarding Satanism or vampirism or whatever, has been far heavier than the weight of media fakery. So if you look at movies, if you look at stories, books, literature, etc., the weight of horror stories about vampires and Satanists is far, heavier than about something that is fake. Sure, you have the odd example here and there, like Wag the Dog and that kind of thing. but the weight on that particular story is far greater. You know.
Good point. It's
Yeah.
the acknowledged versus unacknowledged. So the
Right.
fakery perspective is never acknowledged, but all these other wild MSM plus explanations are given a great deal of acknowledgement. So you're right, they're biasing the collective psyche in favor of supernatural over the mundane, but ultimately very shocking truth that everything's fake to a large degree, or fakeable.
But
Yeah.
here's what we know is that a piece of content, like a piece of visual content or some audio, like from AutoHostCon, like if that was presented in a certain way, that information, it's undeniable. You're gonna reach somebody and like break their programming. If you have a piece of content that's undeniable, it's just there's no way it can't get through. It just has to be done in such a way that it can reach people. And then those people will be come over to this side. They'll be deprogrammed. Just
Yeah,
as they were programmed, they were deprogrammed.
imagine each one of these compelling sections. We'll just say like a 2 minute breakdown or 3 minute breakdown of an event. Each one of these, as they're perfected, axiomatic truths, undeniable truths. These we can treat these as ammunition in the think tank. So the think tank, unlike an echo chamber, is designed to be, mobile to defend itself, but also an offensive thing. And yeah, we could then that's one of the objectives later. So like, when I do want to get all these truthers on our side, not in their present state. They have to be brought to certain realizations. And the way you do it is you attack the guardrails. And the people who understand the dialectic, the argument, far more than the rhetoric and the propaganda, will jump that guardrail. So I think we can systematically break truth or orthodoxies, break their paradigm until they have no choice but to agree with us. I think that will happen because I think, truthfully, most of the people in alt media got there because they were thinking critically and they were thinking too much and they were listening to their instincts, their intuition. They just got caught up in a big honey trap. They got caught up in a morass designed to control them. And it's because there was no other option. This is never acknowledged. The off world stage perspective never existed. And outside of us, it's not going to exist. I'm convinced of it. There is no, if there was, we would know it. Best we have right now is IPS Think Tank, JLB, and Fakeologists. We're the only ones who are aggregating even close to this.
Yeah, Tim, if I may, in regards to the truther being able to see or to take the step to analyze, at the very least, media fakery and not just media, but fakery in general. I actually don't think that attacking the guardrails is the best solution, and I'll explain why. Where they are in a state of war, so any attack is responded with a defense, right? So they will, sort of cover it more and fall back into a defensive position more if they sense an attack. I think that the best strategy, and picking up on what Plain Decoded said, is for them, in their own minds, through their own mouths, using the questions that they usually ask so much, for them to ask different kinds of questions, right? So to promote a condition, a set of presentations, whatever, that makes them change the questions that they're asking. Like, for example, you say the question about chemtrails is, what are they spraying, right? So this is the question that they ask, right? And so it's to turn that question into what is that trail, right? So if you were able to turn to sort of change the type of question, then I think you will more effectively, in my view at least, be able to bring over truthers than through a direct attack, because anything that they perceive as an attack will only cause them to fall back into a stronger defensive position, even if in cognitive dissonance they don't care. The mental characters act that way when they're in survival mode. logic is not taken into consideration.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that approach, and I've had long conversations about this before, about like, do we want to extend an olive branch or burn a bridge? And I went with bridge burning and direct attack for a few reasons. A lot of it's marketing. But I refer to 48 Laws of Power 42, strike the shepherd, the sheep will scatter. And this is about the shock. That if we want to induce paradigm shock, which is what I'm aiming for, I don't think we have a long time for this. And I think the conditions in which this is even possible are diminishing, and it's going to go away. So my intention here is to induce a paradigm shock to the system. So we have to sacrifice some people. So let me take, for example, someone like I could name. I probably don't want to name it here because it'll get out, but I have a list of influencers, and influencers represent specific agendas or psyops who are connected enough to where they have to be insiders. And my objective is attack them, attack the credibility of the witnesses, attack the victims as liars, and offend as many people as we can. And the reason why is that when you offend and you attack the leader, a lot of people will bitterly cling. But the ones who can think, the ones who are ready for this paradigm shift, will break away from them and join us. And we do this once, twice, three times. As we get a reputation for being on the offensive here, they will fear us. And agents will be exposed, and we will still metastasize. Meanwhile, the easily scared and the easily offended are welcome to climb back into their caves. In fact, we want them to fear us because that's a great form of marketing. So my objective here is sort of like Christopher Hitchens and they called them like the Four Horsemen. It was like this group of atheists who were going around debating theism, debating against God, and debating these believers. But it was very well organized, very polite, no screaming, no shouting. They were relentless. Christopher Hitchens, and look, I don't believe these people are real atheists. I understand that they're part of the new scientific paradigm, but their argumentation is irrefutable. They were destroying belief as a legitimate worldview, like belief-based worldviews over knowledge. And that's where we're at. In many ways, we are atheists to the God constructs of the state. And this means that we have to be iconoclasts. It means we have to break stuff. We have to think about it as burning the world stage down. And that's why the insider is called I had someone email me. They said, I want to be a writer for you. If you're going to call it the insider, I don't want to be a part of it because you look dangerous. I'm like, don't you understand that we're not trying to blend in and make friends? We want casualties. We want crybabies. We want Karens. We want mad people appalled at what we're saying. Otherwise, it will get blended in and subsumed in the sea of irrelevance. So we have to be a disruptor. So my objective here is, when it comes to our debates, you have to be polite, you have to be diplomatic, you have to be respectful. When it comes to worldview warfare, we have to be incisive and perhaps even deliberately cruel in our messaging. Like fake dead kids' lives don't matter. I had someone bitch about that. Like, please don't say that. And this was after 10/7. I was like, okay, why don't you get mad at the media for saying that fake dead kids' lives do matter? They're the manipulators. I'm pushing back against the manipulation. So we also have to assert that we have the moral high ground. We have the intellectual high ground, and we need to be the standard bearers for this. So yeah, Trutherville needs to burn. Woketown, mainstream, those are next, but Trutherville's first. And out of Trutherville, there will be bitter clingers. There will be people who won't accept this, and I'm fine with that because the numbers of people that will 10x, 20x the size of the IPS and all the content creators that become a part of the parallel media. And this is how we grow the parallel media. We have to create a schism. We have to create a break. There has to be a seismic shift because we are a disruptor if you think about it. No one else is going to do this. And there may be people figuring things out, but they're not going to aggregate and they're not going to be aggressive about it. They're not going to in any way create a new paradigm. And you don't create it by kissing MSM or MSM plus ass. Like, let me get on to this big show and try to pitch to their audiences that maybe they should think deeper. It's like, no, they're part of the program if they're engaged in the info war. So we have to be hostile to their bad ideas, hostile to the controlled opposition, and no one's going to see it coming. You're not going to see it coming, and that's to our advantage.
It's a pity that reverse history isn't able to talk. I would like to hear his take, but I get your point. I get your point. I think that in most of them are in a group mentality, so an egregore, and they will band around the egregore to defend it, for sure.
Yeah,
But we'll see.
We experienced this with the Bible flat earthers. The Bible flat earthers did not want the non-biblical models or concepts to be given any kind of air. They just didn't want it. They excluded us. And so when it came time, I said, "Hey, we're going to ban these people from the chat. We're going to ban domers, Bible thumpers, neo-Nazis, and globers." So we made it a very point at the inception of the IPS to get rid of the people who had agendas or who were already married to a model. So alt media is a model. And if you're married to a model, you're not infinite plane. You're not open to infinite, or rather, not open to more answers or more information that might change your answers. You've already accepted some conclusions prematurely. So from the very beginning, we had to be not close-minded, but we had to have a certain standard set, and anybody who didn't meet it was kicked out. And a lot of people hated us for it, but after a few weeks and then months, we had 6,000 people. We had regular live streams where 400 people were there, all of them vetted with wrenches. And to get a wrench, you had to answer a question from me via email. How many people died at Sandy Hook, and what do you think about the globe? Hey, what's up, Reverse History?
Hey there, hey guys, great conversation from everybody and very enjoyable. I was making lunch and thanks for reaching out, Àrmunn and gang. Yeah, great conversation. I'll just throw out here on one of those subjects that you recently mentioned that the disruptive aspect is extraordinarily important because acquiescence is is just silence really in the minds of the masses. And I think, given what I'm trying to surmise, which I know has been communicated within the mission of the IPS, I'm in total agreement. It is mind war, it's psy war, and their tactics are, to the extreme of denying us any platform whatsoever. And we have to make our way in the sea. We have to literally have one of these giant cargo ships that just plows through the irrelevance at will. And I'm not suggesting when I say this, but it may sound like it that, oh, this could be a pariah where people are actually, waking up and all of that. No, I think it's very much just a beacon being set out about those that actually have the ability to sit down and, for instance, even listen to this conversation, which has been very enjoyable, and make up their own minds and then begin to participate or activate what they can contribute on their own will, if you will.
Yeah, appreciate that. And in a way, we're facing Machiavellians, masterminds, people schooled in the art of war. And if you look at the art of war, you look at the world today, you would make the case that we've already been conquered by the greatest military minds in history. And I think that case is easy to make. And so to push back, we have to be Machiavellian in a certain sense. And part of that is that maybe we need to tap into the power of being seen as villainous or perhaps even feared, because their fear, their apprehension, could help us in marketing. And also, it's a selling point. There's a lot of people who have pent up frustrations who will be mad. There are people who are like a lot of truthers are agitated because they're rightfully angry at the lies. Well, we're going to give them a venue to fight back. If you're sick of the decades of propaganda that warped your views and the views of your family, if you want to punch back, here's how you do it. You tear down media infrastructure and do billions of dollars of damage to it. As in, them to do damage control for what we're going to ignite, it's going to cost them like NASA's annual budget. Their whole worldview warfare budget is going to have to be directed at auto-hoaxing. Like, we want to create that kind of disruption. If we put a value on it, let's do $1 million or $1 billion in damage. I can guarantee we can make that happen. It's not hard, and what we're doing has great potential. We want to recruit the people who want to become part of the crack gwin. The raft becomes so big that it's unignorable, and they can't ban us because the parallel media will become a self-sustaining ecosystem. Think about what happens if we have 50,000 people in the audience. 50,000 auto hoaxers in the audience and maybe 100 content creators. That's a economy in and of itself of ideas, financial resources to grow the thing. So this will be out of control in very short order. We're kicking it off, and it's meant to be disruptive, but not in the way of like being offensive for its own sake, but we have to be iconoclastic. We have to be prepared to break things and then watch them clean it up. And I think we had that attitude with regard to the IPS at the beginning when we were doing chat raids. And I'm pretty sure that most of the restructuring of YouTube is because of what we were doing in particular.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And actually, when I first found your channel, which was right before the November 3rd non-event or somewhat event with the Spire in Turkey or wherever it was, November 3rd, 2019, that I recall around that time. Now I had a lot of other things going on, so I couldn't really participate the way that I wanted to or really got excited by. But yeah, your bigger chats, they were free form, and it was one of the greatest things I've ever witnessed. And then, of course, and I agree, they have targeted you, they've targeted the channel, everybody who participates. I remember some people even saying that people dox them and have issues with their jobs. I mean, that's the real world war at work right there. But yeah, the nature of moving forward and reorganizing, if you will, in the midst of that heavy hammer of censorship is a huge part of this. So it's great. I mean, I completely agree, and this comes back to a sense of what I observed with marketing, is that the best press doesn't have to be great press. Bad press is great press. And of course, what is happening by definition just throws out all of those orthodoxies, all of those religious rights that happen within the left and right, within this metaverse that they've created for their slave system. It is unified as much as it looks divided. It's totally unified, it's totally controlled. And so I know already, even from just the measure of what feedback I've seen from Auto Hoax number one, that Auto Hoax Con number one, that there is a desire, if you will, for this kind of communication from people that I thankfully people had never really been exposed to the auto hoax methodology or the infinite plane society or the way people talk or converse. And it was gratifying to hear them say this is really exciting. So just coming back to one more point on the feedback of, say, any effort that's already been done, rebuilding that kind of zeitgeist that you once had rolling like a freight train, which is still rolling, which is, shows the momentum of reality and those that will engage in it and support it, as you have been able to be supported, Tim, throughout your effort. But now revisiting the nature of reemerging, if you will, comparatively bringing that back. This is opportunity for those, though they can't ignore us. They cannot do it. If we are left ignored and there's no heavy-handed censorship, the momentum will build enough to have those that are ready or interested or capable jump in. So the initial feedback loop of having that negative response, or having those Karens, as was suggested earlier, or other propagandists actually jump in, or maybe even their sleeping horde because they don't understand that what we're doing is actually parallel to the Capstone's mission. It's actually freeing one from that entire pyramid, that they will, by their own nature, start to argue or try to react in a way that just simply brings their audiences into the attention fold, and potentially those, any of them who really consider what is being presented, will have a choice in their own minds to see the validity of that or reject it and go back into their little goo pods or what have you.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a factor of marketing, is that the people who don't get it will talk about us. Like I did confront someone on Twitter today. They said, I've been listening, interesting connections, but what does a person like me do with this information? And I said, well, if you don't get this by 2024, and I'm just talking about situational awareness about the Psywar, and good luck. I'm not holding anybody's hand. I'm like, no, go ahead and tell your friends there's this group of people that you don't get, and they don't think anything is real, and they think we're all being fooled. Like, let them market this out of incredulity that exists. Let the pushback do our marketing for us, and that's what we need to happen. There's going to be a point where, and they do insert some kind of angle to attack this. They'll inadvertently draw attention to it, And even though they're trying to burn us for the masses, there's going to be a certain percentage who are going to see it and say, hey, these guys are right. So we want that to happen. Acknowledgement is the last thing they want to do. And so I'm like, that's fine. The longer they ignore us, the more we can expand laterally. And then when they finally do acknowledge this, because it slips through and it will eventually, there's going to be a huge body of content and a built-in audience. The parallel media audience, we grow it right through these cons. Let's say we get it to 50K. Any attention drawn to it is just going to exacerbate this. It'll be similar to a 4chan went from this dark corner of the internet to mainstream news when it rode along the Trump campaign coattails. You can see how fast small nuclei can become something vast, and it can happen. They generally try to control the virality of things, and they control it because the audiences are atomized, and they're not connected to anybody, or they're in the box. I'm in the mainstream box. I'm in the alt box. We're not in that box whatsoever. They don't control our audiences. So I'm kind of thinking here, what we're actually doing is we're separating audiences, not just content creators along these lines, but we're creating a separate body of listeners. And so like they have their programmed viewers. All of the viewers of mainstream and alt media have been programmed with all the pre-programming, all the media in the past that is preparing them for what's to come. So we're taking the stance that we're not their target demo, and their spells don't work on us.
You have a point. If I could ask, do you have more or less the numbers of audience in terms of Auto Hoaxology 1, Conference 1?
I don't have the
Just
numbers
as an idea.
specifically, but I could probably get those numbers, and I'll make it a point to do so, because we have the live numbers, and then we have the replays and all the podcast platforms. And then I'm also going to be uploading AutoHoaxCon audio tracks into the 24-hour feed. I can get the metrics there. So we will be able to measure it, and we will measure for growth. And I think that's one of the reasons why we need to do these monthly. We can see progress.
Yeah, because if like imagine that in total there was 1,000 people that watched the Conference 1. If every single one of those 1,000 presents to another person, and let's say from those 50% get it, you have already 500 more, right? So that's the kind of numbers that I was trying to figure out, because people will be, those who are in will already present it, but those who are intrigued by it will present it to someone else. And of course, there's a chance that they will reject it or that they will actually look at it. And it would be interesting to see the ratio of, people that pay attention to that in that way.
Yeah, you know what?
I
There's
tried.
going to be a lot of repeat, and I think we should make it a point to get a lot more speakers in here, new voices who have their own listeners who are already, somewhat aware. So a lot of cross marketing is going to go into metastasizing this thing. Go ahead, Plain Decoded, I think.
Yeah, I was just on your, like, I don't know what that was a good question about what the AutoHost Con did for numbers wise, but I was on your channel today, and I sorted by most popular, and what I saw is that your most popular videos are the ones where you're on screen. And so I personally, like, I like when something is packaged in a way like that. Like people like when they can see the person on screen. That's why those have the most views. But like, I know it sounds like it doesn't matter or whatever, but if you look at the big channels that have lots of views and they get out there, the person's on screen, they have a nice studio, they look good. Like you have to be even though like it seems like you shouldn't have to, but you have to be digestible. Like if your set looked like a Tonight Show set, like people are going to be tuning in. If like you have some like badass set that like has penguins on it and a nice desk and like I know like it's going to be expensive to do that, but the more you can reinvest into your presentation style, you're going to get more eyes just because of the thumbnails and stuff like that. Like that, all that stuff matters a lot.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that, man. That's a good take.
Yeah, especially video. Video does have, that's why I started doing video. I'm just realizing that as this blows up, there has to be a focal point. There has to be somebody to hate. There has to be somebody answerable for what we're saying. And the video element takes us out of the same realm as people like Donnie Darkened and all these anonymous truthers who are just retweeting and regurgitating. There's a level of accountability. So that's another aspect to it as well.
Like if you go on screen during your radio show, because your radio show is awesome, but if you were on screen with a nice set and like I could see, because sometimes, man, some things are so funny. Like I just want to see what your reactions are to some of these things that are being said, because that humor is a great way to get through to people too. Some of the stuff that happens on the show is so funny, and I want to see what like you're thinking and stuff and like your reaction. And but if it looks and if I've seen that and it looks good, like you're gonna get such a good response. I know it.
Well, it is true. This is a multimedia environment, and we're limiting ourselves by sticking to like AM. We have to be cognizant of TikTok. Like, you could take a clip and it could go viral in and of itself. That's why I did the city council thing. The only reason I stopped doing video is Goldfinch had kind of hijacked that whole thing from me, where he was stealing my content and he could take it out of context, and I realized, okay, well, this is getting weird. But he's no longer a factor in that sense. But yeah, I do have to be a physical presence, and also I can market stuff. I could wear my IPS shirts, for example, and I could also have promoting people's designs and stuff. I have some ideas for what I could do with the backdrop and the studio here, and that's one of the reasons I have the headquarters. Books. I could have books on the shelf that I could more readily promote. So yeah, the visual component needs to be there. It might even open up doors to people who only interview face to face. And I was gonna start that with Autohoax Con, where I have a conference room and I'm gonna have people in person. That's one of the next steps. Is we want to involve people here in the office when we do the cons instead of merely online. We have to get into the meat first, so I have to be real. And one other thing too is, in order to separate from agents, controlled op, and people with agendas, we do want to have another level of trust between those who are in the real world together. Like, so people who do the conferences, people who meet in person. Um, we're going to probably have a separate think tank at some point, the IPS Press Club, which may just be a limited access Zoom conference room, but it'll be for those who've been vetted enough to where we can talk about things that we're going to be doing that we don't want to disclose openly. Like, we do have a psyops department and PR stunts department, and then we have targets or breakdowns in various individuals that we're going to be examining closely that we want to either interview or in some way draw attention to. But yeah, we need to have I think more emphasis on real world and people who aren't willing to be in person, even if it's on video. Not that they have to be, but if they're not, it raises some questions in some people's eyes. I don't want to be like one of these anonymous disregardables. And I think that those people who are on X, a lot of these people who are anons, they're hiding their identity because they're probably playing multiple roles and they're following scripts. Donnie Darkin is a classic example of this.
I have another critique if I can. I think like I don't want you to be struggling like to have to get a job and stuff. And I know it sounds like it doesn't sound like appealing, but I think you should promote yourself more like at the beginning and the end of your shows. Like say like, okay, I have the Patreon. Here's the Patreon. Like subscribe here and a reminder like there is a super chat button. Anything would be appreciated. Like just reminding people because a lot of the time when you're watching the show, it's like you're not. I try to click super chat every now and then, but um, people aren't like thinking about it, right? Like it's there, but you're not thinking about it because a lot of people don't like. Probably a lot of your subs don't realize that you have to go to a job. You need this like other job when you shouldn't have to. Um, but like just promote self promotion like that. It's there's no shame in it. Like saying like, here's my Patreon, this and this and this, and like also remind people that there's different tiers because like I saw that I didn't even know you had three different tiers, so I upgraded to the second tier because that's all I can afford right now. But um, just like reminding people, I think is going to help you a lot because you need those funds, right? Like I don't want you to work at where you think you was going to work at a call center. Like, yeah, you don't need to work there.
Well, I kind of de-emphasized trying to ask for support because this lawsuit's progress, and the more confident I become of a win, the less I want to, try to ask other people because, it could be substantial. But yeah, it is a thing. It does become there's a direct correlation between how much I earn on this and how much time I spend in the studio. So I'm always looking for other ways to make money. But for some reason, yeah, the job market has not been kind to me, and I've applied and applied, no reasons given why I'm not employed. Not quite sure. I mean, I'm wondering if I scare people or if there's some kind of social credit score and I'm in the negative, like I'm totally in the red. That could be it too. Maybe there's some kind of social credit score thing, or they're just searching my email address and it's setting off alarm bells. But yeah, whatever it is, I appear to have self-sabotaged that aspect of my life a little bit. But I think I can make it up if I get into publishing a little more deeply. I have more than 500 pages of manuscript ready to be published, and that's just scratching the surface. I could spend a week just compiling a lot of stuff that's gone into blogs, for AutoHoax 102, for example. And I think that once I have these books in circulation, that will also make up for a lot. And I think what I wanted to do ultimately is offer things like if you join at the $10 tier, you'll get a copy of AutoHoaxology 101. So I do need to think about that more. I'll put that in my notes. I need to think about, financing the channel. In fact,
Okay, I'm just going
recently,
to be.
I was going to say really quick here, I'm going to put a link in the chat. I did recently open up a store again. So I'll put a link in the chat. Just I got to get into the habit of promoting it where I have a ton of designs, but I have not been doing a lot of store stuff lately, but I got that started again.
Cool. I just wanted to, I'm going to be listening for a little bit. I can't be talking in a few minutes here, but I wanted to just like change the subject for a second and talk about, because you talk about xenophobia and how that's like one of the dichotomy get into. And I live in Canada, and I know I'm not a xenophobe, but I don't want to live amongst a bunch of immigrants. Like, and what's happening here, and it's noticeable, is that they're flooding Canada in particular. They're flooding us with people from India. And I don't, it's not like I don't hate them or anything. I just don't, I want to live like n not in India. And I know that Canada is a concept and all that stuff, but I find myself like thinking about that a lot. And I'm always talking to Indians. Like if I wanted to live in India, like I'd want to live there, right? But I don't want to be in India. You know what I mean? I want to be from where I was when I was younger. Um, and I guess that's a mind virus that I caught. But that's one thing, and I want to just know your opinion on it. And then two, I think that the a thought I have about that's connected to metascripting is that I think that these metascriptors are so advanced they know, like they've known for a long time that they were gonna flood this country with Indians like hundreds of years. And that's why, because they're not stupid. These aren't dumb people. Like when they came over here to this country, that they and to the United States, that they intentionally called these people that were natives here, that they called them Indians, because they're going to rewrite the history in advance because they knew they were going to import these people here. That's just my opinion and a thought I've had. But it's not fake that these Indians are coming here. It is unbelievable, dude. I don't know. You're in New Mexico, but I live in Alberta, and I'm in India. Like it's more than what I see. Like a traditional Canadian would have been like in the '90s. So I just want to leave that with you, and I want to get what your thoughts were on my stance on that xenophobia sort of thing, and then also that the pre-programming could have gone back that far to where they are naming people Indians in advance to rewrite history in advance. Like, and if they're doing that with other things, so I'll let you go.
Interesting, interesting take. Well, I live in a New Mexico, and this wasn't a state until like 1906 or something. But there was some kind of like there's this border happens and then it becomes a state, but there's already like a pre-existing group of people here. And so like when I say xenophobia, it's more pronounced here in America, where America was never a white monolith. Now their blood's being tainted. Now there's like invasions and it's no longer pure. Like that was never the case here. America was never monolithic, and then it imported people for whatever you believe about the official histories. This was never uniform and monolithic. So when I hear crybabies like Nick Fuentes talking about white Christian nationalism and stuff, it's like you're in the wrong country uh, to even espouse that. Like it's not even historically accurate or achievable at this point. But I do think that the predictive programming for alien invasions has ultimately been about the dissolution of national borders, national identity, perhaps, and breaking everything down into a one whole. But as far as how far back, yeah, I think this is the alien invasion. I think this is the plan. And I think if you have a preference for being around people from the same demographics, you just have to relocate. I mean, what can you do? It's bigger than all of us. And I don't think it's necessarily bad. I mean, I hear the rhetoric about these immigrants are military age. It's like, I don't know. I think they're all just net gains on the economy, and I think there's a lot of exaggeration. And so I'm of the opinion here that okay, there's a reason why DEI is being attacked by the right. Inclusivity. So the left is inclusive, open borders, open skin. They love aliens. The right is exclusive, closed borders. They love stories about home defense, and they're obviously closed skin. Then they're anti-aliens now. So the whole issue itself, to me, is just part of this dichotomy, and it's a deliberate narrative that's been put out there that this is a problem, or that there's this destruction, or that it's somehow they're destroying us by flooding us with them. But you have to look at the numbers for sure and consult demographic trends to know for sure. Like I don't believe in, for example, white genocide. And anybody who says, "Oh, they're depopulating the world," like, well, your basis for believing that is what? And the same people who say they're depopulating the world are not happy with immigrants from other countries being imported. It's like, well, you have a lot of people coming, that solves your population problem, right? And their answer is generally, well, they don't want that particular group. So you get to the crux of it. It's about white genocide theory. So no, I think it's just mostly alarmism and perhaps even phobia virus that you may have picked up. Like you're not going to be replaced. Or perfectly fine, but you are dealing with demographic shifts, but that's life, isn't it? I mean, we have more people than ever. Um, I don't know if was Canada ever monolithically a. I mean, I guess what I'm asking here is like what um was it ever a racial or ethnic state, like a racially pure state? I don't think so.
No, it would, well, like, okay, so I can only talk from my experience, but like growing up, it's, I'm not racist, like, I'm not racist at all, but it was like, you know, a Canadian is like a white guy who likes hockey, or like, he talks in a certain way, right? Like, we celebrate Christmas, we do Halloween, like all the general things. Canada has natives in it, and especially here in Alberta, they're everywhere, and they've obviously like been targeted for destruction. Like my kids are actually partially native, and as I drive around Alberta, like in the big cities, like the native people, like the Aboriginal people or Indigenous or whatever they call them all the time, I think they've been psyop for so long that their entire like traditions. It's so sad. Like it's crazy. Like if you drive around my city, and all the most of the homeless people are all natives or indigenous, and then a lot of white people too. And they've clearly been like targeted for destruction. And I don't know. It's just the culture here has always been Native Indian, Canadians, like indigenous, and then English speaker white people, like the United Kingdom, all those people, and then there's Quebec, and Quebec is French. they're always have been French, and they integrated with the Métis, and they speak. Those are like a hybrid of native and white people. Like that's what the demographic is. And now we're being flooded with Indians from India. And it's like, okay, they didn't mean to call them Indians. They knew they weren't in. This wasn't India. So what are they doing? Like, why would they call them Indians when they know they're not? And then now there's millions and millions and millions. Like I'm just surrounded by them all day, and they're not from here. So like they must have planned this so long ago.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I do think that we're witnessing a ubiquitous alien invasion. And the alien invasion is meant to create a probably, I think it's ultimately about one world, unity, one vision, and destroying, like the whole overview effect. The astronauts go so high, they don't see boundaries. They go so high, they see one world. And one of the barriers to this is the idea that our nation belongs to our people, and it's all, coded. And it's not a coincidence that anti-vax and anti-immigrant are the same people. And it's the same psyop. It's about getting in your blood, whether it's the injection or DNA. It's about the loss of purity for one's group, one's demographic, one's tribe. And I think that's what they're trying to eradicate. They want everybody to be inclusive and open to the alien, whether it's extraterrestrial or otherwise. But I think this is the future. I think this is the future. And my identity isn't wrapped around an ethnic group or a racial group or anything like that. I've always thought America was the ideal, and maybe I'm brainwashed. I mean, that the neo-Nazis would hate me for saying this, but I'm like, I don't think the melting pot idea is necessarily bad. And I look at the people who are espousing, oh, we need to, repel the immigrants and we need to close the borders. It's like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are both married to immigrants. They need to give their wives back. So I think it's a non-issue for the most part. But when it comes down to is if you don't like or if you disagree with or the area you're in isn't compatible with you, you have the freedom to relocate. Just as, the bigger point of it is that we are witnessing something bigger than us and probably, well, definitely centuries in the planning. There's no stopping it. And I think race collectivism is a distraction also. Like I'm not really big on racial collectivism or religious. I'm not really a collectivist. I've been kind of thinking about this for a long time. That one of the primary means of control is getting you to sacrifice your individuality on behalf of your collective, your people, your group. And I'm looking at these groups and like, do these groups even exist, or are these uh, constructs, pieces on the chessboard, and are we being played? And so I point out the xenophobia being connected to fear of aliens and anti-vax because it's intrinsic to the mind war. It's very basic. It's a very primal fear. And I do think all the alien invasion all these alien invasion movies from the beginning, I think, have always been to have two responses. One group of society is going to fear the aliens, and the other group is going to embrace them.
Yeah, I suppose I'll jump in and just add to this overarching subject matter, which is with the outer, the alien, the inner, whatever needs to be protected or defended. That this in itself is an interesting dichotomy that builds into one of the overarching Hegelian dialectics. So that interestingly, all of a sudden, and I'm not speaking for anybody here about xenophobia per se, but the idea resonates with me that even kind of transcending the notion of xenophobia into, and maybe these, I'm using concepts here to just jump quickly to my thought, but for someone who embraces skepticism or even leaps beyond some of these boundaries, which of course culture exists, different types of humanity can be characterized, but ultimately we are human and we share that one dynamic. And I would suppose that anybody from any culture who can leap into that realm of skepticism has really won the mind war in a way. And I'm not certain. Now, this was mentioned earlier by you, Tim, as far as we know we're the only one. Otherwise, we would likely have found another. And I have often wondered if, say, anywhere in the world outside of the U.S., particularly, where, Albuquerque centered, for the sake of this hosting, that would there be a Chinese IPS out there somewhere, and all we need to do is translate everything. Well, I agree that we probably would have found that by now, but this is where I reach back into the xenophobia type of perspective, that I'm more xenophobic, if you will, against the zombies that I have to interact with all the time. That's, if I have xenophobia, that's what it is for me. And by reaching out, not necessarily relaxing anybody's sense of comfort within the scope of how these propaganda juggernauts make themselves impact in our daily lives or through the media, or how our maybe local cultures are impacted, but being able to reach beyond the reason for xenophobia and maybe even targeting the nature of actually reaching a point of awareness of that there's something that bonds us together. And I'm not saying in some kind of kumbaya thing. I'm just saying that when a certain level of skepticism is reached, then these xenophobic elements that would be easy to measure fall apart for someone who actually reached this sense of understanding, if all of that makes sense.
I think so. I mean, I definitely think that the xenophobia, people hate the term but they think these are rational fears to have, and I think these fears are implanted more or less. But I'm trying to look at the bright side as well, and what transcends our other divisions. And it's not a kumbaya thing. I get that. It's more like when we're talking about the intellect, which transcends everything else. This is an intellectual revolt, and for all we know, we may be seeing the arrival of a lot of people who aren't conditioned to the media, where they may be more reachable. Like, I'm curious about this too. Are there think tanks who have seen through predictive programming and its related fake news events and come to the right conclusions? I happen to think not, but if it's there, I think we'll find it. But I think I kind of think that this is something that should transcend our interests, even in elections and voting and politics. Politics is a subset of mind control. So is entertainment. Mind control is the top. Ultimately, we're talking about a world government that's based on mind control, and politics is just one part of it. And this fear of other demographics has always been a part of the mind war. So, like, war is fake in the sense that we've been told that it exists, but it exists in other ways. There are other ways that they can intimidate people. Like, people they call immigrants invaders. I constantly hear that now. They're saying, "Oh, the money from FEMA went to the invaders," so they're building up resentment. And so I'm also inclined to think that most of what people see is just propaganda. I remember seeing so many pictures of like huge lines of military-age men marching over here. These are archetypal images of enemy troops coming to take over. And to me, that's deep-seated fears. And so I kind of reject it all at this point. And as far as demographic shifts, I have no problem with it. I kind of think that these are inflated fears, and that mostly if you are in a tunnel, if you're in a right-wing tunnel, everybody's a threat to you. But to your other point, I think you're right that I have more to fear or more to contend with when it comes to the normies in my everyday life, the people I live with, the people around me. Much less, so why am I concerned about people out there? To me, it's an abstraction, and I think abstract fears work very well. You try to get into the specifics, there's nothing there. And so I think that a lot of the mind war is just these abstract, kind of vague but ever-present fears that are always looming. And I like to kind of dispel those if I can.
Yeah, well said. I agree. I see too the xenophobic perspective is implanted in the mass consciousness, and there are shifts that do happen. I think that sometimes I've seen where certain communities seem to be shifting in some fashion, but the overarching
directive of the fear-based fear-mongering of xenophobia is an implant in the society. And yeah, the approach of trying to navigate the world of those that, I mean, even like the shutdown, I was surrounded by people that wanted to tell me what to do, and these are people in my everyday life, and that's where the rubber hits the road. And being able to, at bare minimum, communicate these, for lack of a better term, ideals of awareness and methods to apply a certain sense of critical analysis, critical thinking, media analysis, even going beyond, which is something that is probably further down the road. But as you were saying earlier, Tim, the nature of being able to advertise, if you will, and reach a wider market, then at some point, there is a point where there's enough of us that we can literally start trading with each other and have something that is more self-sustainable, but you have to start somewhere. And the philosophic start is the most fundamental foundation to start from. And that is something that can be codified and shared, which has already been shown to be successful within the efforts that's happened here in the Infinite Plane Society. So yeah, the battle continues. Some aspects of the fears implanted in society are hurdles only of the mind. The other hurdles out there are the ones that we can really bear fruit from, which is reaching those people who are capable of thinking for themselves and somehow managing to get beyond those that would otherwise ignorantly attack for no reason other than trying to protect their religious gods, if you will, whether they be media, political, or actually religious icons. But yeah, there's this thing that's happening here, and in my mind, it blends itself to the analogy of a fire being lit that with enough, let's say, reach, then that fire can expand, no doubt, and be self-expanding in a certain way.
Yes. And we do see how people who join up with big groups become empowered by it, and they feel like they have the authority of this big group backing them. And some people cow to that. And I see collectives, like racial collectives or political collectives, where they're able to more or less merge with that. And it can be an effective way to grow something because it exists as like an entity. And I think that's where media skeptics need to be. That we will get to a point as a self-aware demographic that the numbers speaks for itself. We don't have to be defensive. If people don't believe it or they reject it, we wouldn't care. We just kind of move forward without asking for approval. So what's nice about what we're doing here is we're not asking for approval. We're not making concessions. We have to flush out people with agendas. I have some people say, what does it matter if it's fake when Israel is destroying the world or whatever their narrative is? And it's like, okay, so you have now put your group identity ahead of epistemology and your perception of truth itself. And the people who think that fake is secondary to the quote kinetic real thing that is about to happen, they're falling for the same trap. They're putting the simulation ahead of their own cognition. And I think that's what we're moving towards here. It's like this is way beyond group politics. This is way beyond wandering. This is beyond a lot of the phobias and insecurities that they programmed out there. And I think that
it is. Although, if I may, just to address Plain's concerns and his point, we do. I think it would be a mistake to ignore the tool that is being used with that, because it is not really. In a deeper sense, it's not really about race or about nationality or whatever. What it is about a clash of mentalities. Now, we know that the Western culture, the Western type of civilization is being controlled demolition, right? So that much has been verified. And this is a tool that has been used by bringing in a different mentality. So it is not really about race, because if these, people just wear different clothes and have different skin colors or whatever, but if Blaine felt that they liked hockey, like he said, and talk in a certain way, he wouldn't feel it. He wouldn't have that clash. He wouldn't have that reaction. So what it is you bring in different cultures, which do not necessarily need to be of one type or another. It's just different. That sort of shake the boat, the cultural boat, enough to create a friction. You understand? So that to ignore that is there would also, in my view, be a mistake, because it is clearly a tool being used by the implementers of this, in my view.
Yeah, it comes down to it's not about the country or the people. It comes down to, for me, the culture. Because for like, I don't want to be an example that Reverse talked about was during COVID, when now we have within our culture we have two different cultures: the culture of the people who are embracing the culture of the people that are busy. Busy. You're off mute.
If you
Okay,
server mute busy, and then you'll unmute him when later on, because
yeah.
I don't think he's aware that he's unmuted. Sorry, go ahead, Blaine.
So once, like, within our culture, when we had COVID, we have two cultures. One of the people that don't want to be masked, and then the Tim, can you mute that guy?
Yeah, he's muted now.
No, he's not.
Um,
No,
Busy it is,
no, you need to server mute him.
or you might have to kick him. Kick him.
Okay, well, really quick here, just for anyone who just got here, this is episode 1 of the IPS Deep Think Tank, and we're going to be meeting here a couple of times a week to discuss a lot of things and lead into the next AutoHoaxCon. And so, just for your information, the next AutoHoaxCon, which will be number 2, is going to be on likely Saturday the 26th. And so, if you want to be a part of it, I'll be posting a flyer, and we'll continue along the same veins, number 1, but more streamlined, more participation, and I think we have a better concept moving forward. So just a heads up for anyone who just got here, that's kind of what we're discussing. But yeah, go ahead, play Decoded.
Okay. So then within our own culture, we had this COVID, and so now I don't like being around the culture of the people who embrace COVID, and I do like being around the culture of people who disregard it and want to, like, this think tank that we have, the IPS. Like, I'd rather hang out with all of you guys any day than anyone who embraced the COVID psyop, right? So it just comes down to, like, the culture and what do I want to be around in it, and that's my thinking about it. So then they're doing a mind war on me by having these people come around, right? That don't mesh with my culture and myself, and it's forced. It's not natural, and there's nowhere for me to go. I can't go anywhere because I live on. I could maybe, but they've made a ball for us to live on where we can't go anywhere, and that's why one of my favorite opiums is that there's more lands somewhere else.
And in general, the newcomers to a strange land will tend to absorb the virtual reality. Let's say the what is presented much quicker than the residents, and so it's like what you were saying about being outnumbered by people who aren't entirely in the rapt, Tim. It's more or less the same tool being used there. So the people that come in do not bring the same mentality and are more prone to accept and adapt because they want things to go well for them in their new life. And so they will eventually drown the residents, like you were saying, could happen with the IPS. So it's just a point that is something that we shouldn't ignore, and take into account nonetheless.
Well, let me bring this up too, though, because
Mhm.
if you look at, I mean, this is a whole other topic, but people come into this country or they move to another country, and then you look at their children. Do their children carry forth the same traditional beliefs? Do they have the same religion, the same fervor? Do they speak the same language? Do they assimilate? They break away from what they came from? Because I know people who come here from somewhere else, Muslim families, for example, but they become completely westernized and they reject that stuff. They maybe become far left. I know some far left liberal leftists, and she came from the complete opposite. So, like, I kind of don't really have any idea there are these racial monoliths that are unchanging, that are going to be naturally conformist. I think it comes down to the level of the individual and
Oh, no,
cognition.
that wasn't my point, Tim. That wasn't my point. So what
But
I'm
what,
saying is
what I'm
that.
saying is, generally speaking,
Oh,
though, can it be said that people from other places retain and don't assimilate or break from traditional beliefs? And I think, if anything, the melting pot concept offers the dissolution and the ability to break away from previous constraints, like, for example, a feminism, for example. Maybe you can't practice that in other places. And so the people coming over here from places that are more rigid in their roles may leave with that, but they come over here because they may be leaving that behind. So I kind of don't know yet if that's going
yeah,
to
but it's
be.
like for example, people who were, and I've had contact with, people from what was the behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union. So those countries in Eastern Europe. And what happened was that they, for a long time, did not have access to Hollywood movies, right? So when the gates were open and the Iron Curtain was lifted, they consumed Hollywood movies as if it was this wonderful, marvelous thing, and they overconsumed it, meaning that they were over-programmed. You understand? And so it's not a matter of them carrying their mentalities that will, impose upon the residents. It's that those that come in will be more exposed, more prone to be exposed to the programming than the residents, because the residents already, are established, are settled, and if they were, given enough leisure time, let's say, they could start thinking about other things. A newcomer in a strange land will be more prone to have access to things he never did. And so he will consume everything about that culture, including, of course, the big bulk of the fakery, and become, programmed.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
if
agreed.
you could really mute or kick Busy, because I don't think he realizes that he's unmuted, and he's this is going to be on the recording.
You, you can
Oh,
mute
okay.
them if you go on top. You can mute them individually. You
Yeah,
just
but
kind of
then it
press
goes in
on.
the recording. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, there it goes. Yeah, I guess one
Yeah.
other point too is that the mind war has people involved in these dialectics, and if you're talking about those, let's say we have 50 media skeptics, fully informed auto hoaxers in the room for 1 hour. That's 50 people, 1 hour concentrated thought. And if we focus on how do we deconstruct these psyops where people give these side of the road accounts of what's happening down the street in North Carolina, for example, or the latest spate of claims against Diddy. So we're trying to like examine in an objective way Psywar as it's hitting us, or we're looking at the connections between these movies, these directors, and the news events. So we're talking about this. We got the best minds on the subject. Now suddenly, someone's like, "Well, I'm worried about the demographic shift. It's going from being dominated by my racial group, this other racial group." Well, we can talk about that for an hour. Now we just spent an hour with 50 sharp minds in blue pill territory, Normieville concerns. And so I think a lot of these like basic Psywar components, left right dialectics that are in the Infowar, I think we can talk about them from from an outside or a higher perspective or an objective perspective, but I'm not going to personalize it and say I'm worried about Haitians in my neighborhood because that has no place here. It has no place with
Oh,
media
sure. And
deconstruction.
yeah,
And so like,
of
I'm just saying
course.
like as a and so I look at the raft as an escape from all of that. So like I think that these are distractions that we should all be aware of. And we can talk about it, but we have to also be aware that yeah, you're likely being played because I can from experience, I can remember when I used to believe all the news and I'd hear this guy Michael Savage on air tonight. I was actually worried for my parents. I was worried about gangs from South America and Mexico and MS-13 coming to our city because there are gang members here, making this place increasingly hostile and dangerous. That was a fear of mine for a long time. And then I realized I was being played. And so like I'm just not going to get played anymore. And if somebody's still being played or they're scared or they're worried or
Yeah,
they're concerned, it's like that's not my problem.
and here's the thing, like plain decoded. Like you need to realize this is a mind war, okay? And yes, the West is under attack. All this nationalism stuff, like oh, proud to be like I gave that up the minute I saw this flat Earth shit. That all that shit went out the window. That doesn't matter anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like you're still holding on to this dichotomy. Like oh, can I? Yeah, and that's great, but you have to realize you also have to accept that we're under attack. Say bye bye to all that shit, all that old Canadian traditions, like just like America. That you have to realize that's gonna be gone. Like this is it. Like you have to let that shit go. And
Oh
anyway,
yeah, I have. I'm just talking about it because uh, I have done that. I actually told Tim on the text. I said Canada's like not Canada isn't like Canada is nothing. So when they talk about in Parliament when they talk about Canadians want this, Canadians want that. Like I'm a Canadian supposedly. What's a Canadian? A Canadian is anyone and anything. A Canadian is nothing, and the country is no more. And I've already accepted that. I'm just I guess
yeah,
personally,
that's what they're doing. And and you get that bombardment on the news, like with the immigrant and all this shit is just playing into it. So you just gotta like, okay, it's going down. This is it. The front lines have moved from not borders to now it's mental, like literally. So I mean, I don't.
yeah.
The only,
And
the only, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, the only point that I was bringing to the discussion regarding that subject was let us, do a mental exercise, which is, do you think the immigrants will be leaning towards observing and analyzing the fakery, or will they treat media as if everything it reports there is real? I think they will tend towards the second, and this is on a purpose, and that's why I say it's a tool. So it's not about the race. It's about destabilizing the resident culture on one hand, and on the other hand, increasing the numbers of quote unquote normies, if you like, because it doesn't matter if their religion is different or whatever, as long as they worship the monolith. And you do see integration of these immigrants, of course, and the first thing they do is consume media, is to be involved in media, not from a skeptic point of view, but treating it as something that probably they didn't have with as prevalent in their home countries, something like that. So that
I
is
want to
what I'm
bring
talking about. Yeah.
before
Yeah,
Mike's crash, before Mad Mike crashed in February of 2020, we were talking about this stuff and we were talking about getting things translated. And at that time, it had been reported that there were 11 million flat earthers in Brazil. And I thought, okay, wait, there's 11 million people who maybe they don't have the right model, but they're at a certain level of sophistication when it comes to criticizing the bullshit in front of them. So I'm looking at that as okay, they're rejecting big claims. I follow Japanese flat Earth Twitter accounts because they're hilarious. They do Google Translate, and so I'm seeing that there is this kind of widespread rejection of a lot of that stuff when it comes to the space stuff. I don't know about the other events, but space is a good starting point. It's a great starting point for bringing in people who are at a certain level irreverent about the dominant paradigm and willing to question it, and then also finding humor in it. So I kind of think that the idea of this thing being like auto hoaxing and skepticism being solely here, or a byproduct of people who have already been a part of our mainstream quote culture and fictional universe, that's likely true in a lot of ways, like when it comes to the psyops in general. But when it comes to fake space, I think we have an in. I remember the Indonesian Flat Earth Society. They had 279,000 followers on YouTube before they shut them down. That's twice as big as the biggest flat earth channels like Jaren. And 279,000 people, Indonesian flat earthers. And you know what happened to them? We're going to set up a conference. I think that the founder and his son were murdered, and they were burnt. Their bodies were found burnt in a car. We were looking into the story, and you know what? I remember when I looked at this, I thought this is crazy because nobody was talking about it. No flat Earth channels, no big channels were like, yeah, the Indonesian Flat Earth Society, their leadership were burned. And I remember at the time thinking, could it be perhaps that maybe their numbers were too big, and that perhaps they had to be like shut down or something? In fact, I'll put the article here.
Into that, so does it smell fakery?
Not at all. I didn't detect anything fake about this one. It wasn't promoted. It wasn't hyped. It wasn't attended by crisis actors. And no, I looked at it extensively, but I'll pull up some articles from it.
Why would they have to kill them though? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, it wasn't related to this. It wasn't related to Flat Earth. They were killed over something else. But I do recall being strange to me that you have a channel that they were trying to set up a Flat Earth conference. They had 270,000 followers, and they got murdered, and nobody talked about it outside of my own channel. Literally nobody talked about it. And I thought that's kind of weird. Like, imagine if Mark Sargent and Patty Steer turned up dead, burnt to a crisp in the back of a car in some alley. Don't you think it would be talked about? And they weren't as big as the Indonesian Flat Earth Society. And here we have 11 million Brazilians. So I kind of think that skepticism and the philosophical breakdown of media from this perspective might have a wide reach, and it's not bound by anything other than our ubiquitous relationship to the screen. And I think we have a common ground here. I do think skeptics of the world could unite. I put a phrase up here. I think I put auto hoaxers, no, yeah, deprogrammed of the world stage unite. And so who knows how widespread it is, but I think fake space is a way to get a lot of people into the conversation. And it filters out non-critics. People who aren't critical can't even consider the topic. That's the value of the flat earth question. It filters out the non-critical.
Yeah, I was saying just in a sort of jokey tone, is that the communist template? Because the workers of the world unites. That sounded. You stole their slogan, right?
Oh yeah, that's the communist slogan. And then I also am stealing "Go forth and set the world stage on fire" from the Jesuit founder Ignatius Loyola. Yeah, I'm definitely appropriating from Weishaupt, Loyola, and Marx. Anyone who's ever had some kind of revolutionary concept, we need to appropriate.
Instead of a hammer and sickle, you can have a blue wrench, and a space station. Something.
So
Awesome.
that's good.
And
That's
a penguin,
good. Yeah.
a blue wrench and a penguin beak.
Yeah. Hammer and sickle, wrench and beak. That's a pretty good.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can AI it. I think the problem of being small, like a small raft, and then you have this entire sea of irrelevance. I think the numbers thing can definitely expand without lowering quality. We can get the quantity, effective outreach, and I think that's going to be auto hoax cons, lots of voices, and then sound bites or segments, and we let the information draw people into the next one, because people will want to be at number 3, number 4, number 5 as it picks up steam. If we do these monthly, I think we'll see some significant and sustained growth in our numbers, and it'll be quality contributors.
I bring a side topic. Maybe I could bring it over the live later on if I'm awake. But I don't know if you mind if I do it here.
No, by all means.
Yeah. Could there be a connection? And this question also expands to anyone here. Reverse history, Co-Penguin, Plain Decoded, Skyfish, and Exploring Again. Which is, could there be a connection between the Scott Key Bridge being demolished previously and now a hurricane affecting the Florida Keys?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Francis Scott Key Bridge, Florida Keys, and a few months ago I watched that movie called Roundhouse, which has Donnie Darko, who's like a Trump proxy, and it takes place in Florida. And one of the main components is this bookstore called the Crystal Key. So the key thing has been a reoccurring theme, and you may be onto something here.
At the time, if you remember, when you were doing a live about the bridge collapse, it came to my mind about the papal insignia that has the 2 keys. Remember that?
Right, the crossed keys. Yes, yes.
Right. Yeah. And so it could be, I don't know, it could be just a hunch of a connection between the collapse, so the demolition of course, in the narrative, the accidental collapse of the bridge, and now the accidental, hurricane that affected Florida Keys, which is one of the main, I believe, tourist areas, isn't it? Or rich areas of Florida, if I'm not mistaken, although I'm no expert in. Come on, guys, don't leave me hanging.
Yeah, something's up with this. And someone had brought up how the Penguin show just came out, and it flashes back to the Batman movie's Flood. So the flood theme here. But yeah, the Keys, Francis Scott Key Bridge, and it was the Dolly ship that knocked it over, which probably has some deeper significance. But yeah, you're probably picking up on something here within the meta script. And one of the key
And
components
also,
of this,
what?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh well, this hurricane was called Milton, and there was a movie with a hurricane called The Disaster named Milton. So, and the process of naming hurricanes, you know what I mean? They do this the year before or whatever. You know what I mean? Like they alternate. Like the M, one year the M will be a guy's name, a male name, and then the next year will be a female name. They alternate like that. So anyway, but they had plenty of time to name these things. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they named this one that actually touched landfall and did all this stuff Milton. You know what I'm saying? Like they chose this one to name it Milton because they knew it was going to hit or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And so wouldn't that be the Paradise Lost, right? Because those people were living in their own, cool environments, and everything was going well, and all of a sudden it's lost, right? So in the narrative, that would be a kind of loop back to Milton's Paradise Lost.
Yeah, and one of Milton's quotes, which is completely and totally relevant to the mind war topic, is the mind is its own place. It can make itself a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. Paradise Lost, that's the mind of the auto believer, losing their peace of mind. That's kind of what really we're looking at here is the peace of mind is not meant to be attainable. We're meant to be in the mind war at all times. And this is something that may aggravate people who are deep in the mind war. It does aggravate them. Like, you're not concerned about demographic changes. You're not concerned about geoweapons, geoengineering. You're not concerned about Vaxageddon. And I'm like, no, I'm absolutely not concerned of any of this stuff. My mind is in a place of quiescence right now because I am a non-believer. And that may infuriate some people because we're not ready when things get kinetic. When have they ever gone kinetic? We've given enough benefit of the doubt to the alarmists out there where now one of the groups that we've more or less excluded has been alarmists. And alarmists who are alarmists who remain among us eventually cease to become alarmists about it and become more analytical, which is what we need.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe that connection with the keys will prove important later on. So note it down. It may turn into something or nothing. So, and I still think
mind map these things, and just like for future reference, anything with key references that you see may pertain, we'll just add on to it until we see if there's a discernible pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, I want to say thanks to everyone here who has been a part of this chat. We still have a few more minutes, but what I'm doing is we're going to be doing these more often. It's just a separate podcast, and it'll lead up to the AutoHooks cons, get more ideas out there. And I'll be posting this on the main channel so we can get comments and feedback, and then more people will likely want to join the next one. So if you're subscribed to the newsletters, obviously you'll be given notification in advance before we do these. And so this is just IPS Deep Think Tank, and this has been episode 1. And whenever we're through here, I'm just going to process this as a podcast. So if you missed anything or you want to listen later, I'll be making it available.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a great conversation. I didn't get to, I heard everything from the beginning. I didn't get to jump on right away, but brilliant stuff all the way around through and through, everybody's commentary, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next one. And yeah, I think that this has a great potential to bring people in and have this kind of population of various ideas and subject matters to discuss in a bit of a free-form way. It's really very intriguing and exciting. Good stuff.
Indeed. Thank you.
I'll be on the lookout for some kind of theme music. So I'll put the word out there. Anyone listening, if you want to submit something, we want an opening, closing for the IPS Deep Think Tank.
Portal Complex had done an intro song or an intro music for that. It's in his channel. I can send you if you like.
Send it to me, and
yeah,
I'll be able to attach it to this and then make it a little more formal, and then people can look forward to it. And yeah, it's a great format. And we used to do Discord chat all the time.
You broke up there. We couldn't hear what you said.
I heard what you said.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm going to end the recording right now. And just, again, thanks all of you for being here. And we'll record another one here in a few days.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome to the IPS Deep Think Tank.